you, recording in progress. Have any of you had any interesting contractual items come up? Well, last time we met was April 22nd, so we're almost 3 weeks out. So I'm assuming you've done some deals. Don, anything interesting you've seen lately in your book of business?
Oh, I had a VA appraisal come back in Tidewater.
Nice. Was did that land well?
Um, well, I submitted some comps and he came, I don't know what his original value was, but what he turned in was $5,000 lower than our sales price, which we could live with.
Yeah. So while we're on that topic, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole with this, but just a reminder to everybody on this call, right? Of course, when you do either FHA or VA, you're going to have the FHA VA addendum. And then what do you typically get from the other agent or from their lender?
The mandatory clause.
The amendatory clause, which I think is hilarious, right? Just the title in and of itself. What is it exactly amending? Because it doesn't make reference to the REPC itself nor the FHA VA addendum. So it's amending something yet to be declared. Now, I've covered this a few times. I want to see how good your memory is. What is the hangup? What is the potential problem with the amendatory clause? Uh-huh.
It says that well, you get it at the last minute and it says the VA or the FHA buyer can back out at the last minute with no repercussions to them
Based on what?
based on a low appraisal.
Based on a low appraisal. And here's the part I want you to remember. In the FHA VA addendum itself, that is in the REPC, it says as long as the appraisal comes back at or above the purchase price minus concessions, right? So $500,000 house, $10,000 in concessions, it has to appraise for 490. Guess what it doesn't say in the amendatory clause? It doesn't say purchase price minus concessions. It just says purchase price. So in my scenario, if you sign off before closing, and trust me, there's some lenders that get out right out of the get-go, and you have other agents and brokers saying, we've got to get this signed. I'm telling you, talking to our own lending company and two other lending companies, that is only required to be included with the final package when it goes for final review. So you don't have to sign that until closing. The point being is, if you sign that amendatory clause early and you're representing the seller, you've just given away $10,000 of position on appraisal. Does that make sense? So if the purchase price was 500,000 and there was $10,000 in concession, as soon as you sign that, the appraisal has to hit 500,000, right? The FHA VA addendum says remove concessions. That's the hurdle you have to jump, which is 490. So my point to agents all the time is, if somebody sends over in a frantic mess, oh, we got to get this signed. We went under contract yesterday. Like, yeah, not so fast. Tell you what, we will get it signed. We will definitely get it signed before or at closing so your people can close. But let's get through the appraisal first and see where we are, right? And if they ever have any questions with that, get myself on the phone, get Red on the phone. We'll explain to them the way this really works, because a lot of them, nobody's a bad act. Well, most people are not bad actors, but they just don't actually understand the process. They actually don't understand the discrepancy. I don't know why the amendatory clause doesn't have the same exact language as what's in the FHA VA, but just be aware of that. So that's a good one. Kyle, any interesting deals? James? Okay, Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, I got one. I think we kind of talked about it. I still shaking my head over it, but we have a lot. My builder is not recorded, so we put in a reservation, although it is a contract. But the addendum does say reservation. I said that the deposit, which is 25,000, it was quite a bit of money for the deposit, is not to be deposited until it records, and they counter back saying that this is a reservation, and it does get to be deposited at the title company. So of course we just whatever. I mean, we had the money in the account, not a big deal. But still, I don't know how title companies get away with that. I still don't know if that's even a legal way to do it, because they're commingling, or are they not commingling because it's a title company? I don't know. So, like I said, I haven't fought it because we want the lot, but it was just kind of an interesting how it's not even recorded yet, but they got our $25,000 in deposit.
Yeah, so I'm writing myself a note, Kyle, because there's several moving pieces to this, and frankly, I'm going to reach out to Wendy Snow and see what Metro's position on that is. But from a real estate point of view, there's a reason why developers take lot reservations. The main reason is why, Kyle. You just said it.
To get it sold, get it under contract, and see
Okay.
what's in the
Yeah, but why do they not take a contract?
Because they can't, because it's not recorded.
It's not recorded.
No
it's not a thing yet. There's no tax ID, right? And the Division of Real Estate is very particular about this. I've had this discussion with a few of the investigators at the DRE, and they say, yeah, you know what? And it's kind of interesting your experience, because their opinion is it's pretty much a lot about nothing, because until there's a property there, your lot reservation really doesn't mean much. Right now, I get it, and it's something we deal with, and we can't just wave a wand and make it go away. And most builder developers will honor that, right? So let's say they're 2 weeks away from the plat being recorded and each lot having a tax ID, and you want to get quote unquote in line, right? They're gonna say, okay, lot reservation, you're client number 4, et cetera, et cetera. It's a structure that we use, but when we get down to brass tacks, if the builder turned around and wanted to and said, you know what, here's your money back. I'm now relisting these, and everything went up $10,000. They're totally entitled to do that. It's like in the commercial space. It's a close cousin. What is a letter of intent? I mean, it's really kind of, you think of the same thing, right? A lot reservation, a letter of intent. It's not actually the contract, right? But it gets everybody starting to put their thoughts down on paper and talking dollars and stuff like that. But there's a reason why commercial guys eventually get a contract, right? Because the LOI is effectively not terribly binding. So,
yeah, and I'm not. It doesn't. What I've done in the past when we control subdivisions, we would just take the check and staple it onto the contract and say, okay, once it records, we'll go through. But they actually cash the check. That's the thing that's kind of like.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about that, from a titles perspective, because they're only supposed to have money in their trust account, just like ours, for something that is, not something that will be. So anyway. All right. Well, kind of interesting. Got a lot. Thanks for sharing those couple of items. I really do like to hear it, and to know what we're going through on a day-to-day basis. So we had our class the last contract class was April 22nd. And basically it was a bunch of information on industry knowledge, not for the sake of trivial pursuit, but how do you actually leverage that, right, in becoming a better agent, becoming a better resource to not only your current clients, but your SOI, and by extension, their SOI. That's the magic, right? SOI is cool, but as soon as you can start being trusted enough that they will trust you with their kids, their brothers and sisters, their neighbors, man, that becomes a compounding effect. So this is in that category. You hear this from me all the time. How prepared are you? This is a rhetorical question today. How prepared are you when somebody asks you the golden question? And the golden question can take a lot of forms. And it would be, hey, is it a good time to buy? Hey, is it a good time to sell? What's going on in the industry? Any of those variations, I really want you to think about right now what you would say, right? Does it make you nervous to take that question? If so, you need to do more homework. I hope you get to a point with your not only your industry knowledge, but your contractual knowledge, that you're like chomping at the bit, waiting for somebody to ask that question, right? That's when you know you've started to arrive. Parker, how nervous are you right now if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, Parker, I've heard rates are all over the map. Is it a good time to buy?" I don't want your answer. I want to know, are you excited about that or are you nervous?
No, I'm definitely excited about that. It's a conversation
Okay. And why are you not nervous?
because I know the marketplace.
You do. You and I have a lot of discussions, and you invest the time. And so I'm not trying to, blow smoke in your face and make you
Sure.
all,
Yeah. No.
but it demonstrates the point. You and I have known each other for a long time. You were trained well. And honestly, guys, it is such a great feeling to when you've done the preparation and you do it on a regular basis, so that somebody comes and asks you that you're not like, "Oh crap, wait, what was the latest step? Oh my gosh, I don't know." They smell that on you, versus being able to turn around and be like, "Oh man, Parker, I am so glad you asked that question." You know, most buyers that I talk to don't even ask the right questions. You're asking the right question. You got 2 seconds. I'm going to give you some information that pretty much nobody else is going to give you because they don't know the industry like I do.
It's that
Oh,
saying. It's that saying, right? Good agents, understand the market, or good agents know the market. Better agents understand the market. The greatest agents can explain the market.
yeah. And that explanation point is to where, and it's usually done, believe it or not, through well targeted questions of the person you're talking to, so it becomes their decision, right? Rather than me telling you what to do, I'm going to ask you the right questions, like, so here's some information. What does that look like to you, right? Because I want it to be your conclusion, because people very rarely argue with their own conclusions unless they're schizophrenic like me. All right, good deal. Deborah, sorry, did you have a comment? Oh, that's
No.
okay.
No, I was dealing with the toddler who came in throwing a tantrum.
Hey, you know what? Sometimes it's like a client. Sometimes they throw tantrums. All right. So anyway, here's my question to you. That was April 22nd. I asked everybody, please put on your calendar the beginning of a month calendar item so that you go and actually start doing your research. If you know how to work Zoom and you know how to use the reactions down below, if you did it, give me a thumbs up on your screen. How many of you spent time at the beginning of May going through research information, industry information? All right, 2. All right, well, I can't see the rest of the screen, but I'm gonna be like, I don't know. I'm gonna go parental. Dan, good job. All right, 4 or 5. Sweet. I'm gonna keep reminding you of this because I think it's so important. The things I'm gonna cover today, the last point on my agenda today is all of the training here that we do on contracts and negotiation, and other training, frankly, for that matter, is relatively useless unless you put it into action by thinking it through and then practicing it. So Parker, since I started off picking on you, do you ever sit down and actually go through what you're going to say if somebody asks those questions, or they want to know, absorption rate? I don't care what it is. Do
Yeah.
you actually practice it?
Yeah, all the time.
Why haven't you been
Because
in the industry? Haven't you been in the industry for 18, 20 years, something like that?
yeah, but that's the wonderful thing about our industry is it's always changing. It's always needing new adaptation.
Yeah.
That's one of the fascinating things that keeps me passionate about what I do, is the fact that it's always pressing forward. And if you want to stay on top of it, you have to know how to explain it to people.
Yeah. And my experience, just see if this resonates with you. We all, in our mind, we all talk a good game. Oh yeah, I'm so ready. I'm ready for somebody to ask that question. And then they ask the question and you feel, even if you've done some research, you maybe there's less panic, but there's still a level of panic, like, well, what should I say first? What should I say next? What should I, right?
It's called anxiety, Matt. That's called anxiety.
Well, yeah, there's always a little bit of anxiety, but the question is it self-inflicted? And the self-inflicted part is, did you actually take the time to, I mean, I'm an outline thinker, right? I don't write every word, but I will, whether I have to give public speaking something or come onto a presentation, I will, just like I did, this morning, I will chart out an outline so I know where I'm going, right? Because that takes some of the pressure off. If you don't know where you're going, you're just, I mean, it is panic. You're like, oh crap, I just said this and I'm not sure where it's going to go. And um, but if you have an outline, you know the structure, you know the 3 or 4 points you need to hit, you know what sequence they need to be in. And that way you can relax and be conversational, and you can flip the script instead of presenting. You can ask questions rather than presenting. That's when you know you've started to arrive, right? In working with clients. Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
Just a thought. I think even when you know the market, you know the information, you know what you would want to communicate, you don't always know what the the the, the person asking the question has some perspective. And it's always helpful. First thing I want to know is what have you heard? What are your concerns? What have you heard? What are you looking to do? There's two reasons for that. One is I want to know their perspective, because I might have 13 things I could communicate to somebody, but I'm not gonna tell the same person all 13. But the other thing. So one, I want to know the perspective, and I want to know where what they've heard and how I can either confirm or correct that. But the second thing is, while they're telling me what they've heard, I can formulate which of those 13 things I'm going to communicate to them.
You have it? Okay.
To
James, you are hitting on such a key point. I want to make sure everybody's paying attention to that, right? The sooner you can turn around. How many of you get into a presentation? It's like, oh, okay, so I covered this, and oh, what's next? And it's almost like, no joke, it's almost like a performance. The other person's just sitting there going. And so you have no read on them. You don't know where it's going. You hope the next thing you say is going to be important to them, but they, like I'm doing right now, they just sit there tight-lipped and just go, or worse. It's like, oh crap, why are they shaking their head? No. So James hits a key point. The faster you can get to asking questions, and I don't mean like the ones where we all have a good barometer when somebody's just asking questions to ask questions. That's not what I'm talking about here. Intelligent, meaningful questions. So James, if you and I are having a dialogue, I'd be like, James, you know what? Thank you for meeting with me, and see if this plays, right? You know what? I have a ton of information I'd love to share with you. I'm now addressing the elephant in the room, right? I have a ton of information that I can share with you, but I have found over the years, it's better for me to just ask the question. So I'm going to do this with you. What are the things that are most confusing to you? What are the things of most concern? What are the things how can I help you? You know what the beauty of that is? I'm coming off like I'm not the typical realtor egotist. Let me tell you about how I'm the shiz and all that. And it flipped the script right then and there. James now has to perform. And like he said, I can sit back now. I'm going to have a pen and paper, and I'm going to write down in an outline format the things that he brings up. Man, now I know where I need to go with the conversation. This seems so intuitive, but I have done this with agents over and over again where I say, okay, so let's go through your buyer script. I'm your buyer. Let's just do a little role play. This is when I know they haven't done practice much, because all of a sudden you can just see like the beads of sweat percolating on their forehead. They're like, oh crap. And you know what the excuse is? I hate role playing. I'm like, you know what sucks more? Going to a presentation and blowing it. That's even worse.
Yeah, because you never get a second chance with that, right? So understanding context really can help you perform at a very high level. Because it's like you said, we have all this stuff, and it's really easy for us when we gather this information to want to spit it back out to people. The problem is we throw it up instead of being able to just allow them to congest.
Can I speculate here, Parker? here's what I would speculate when I'm the client in that situation, and the realtor is just running on and on. And there's good information. It's not like you're presenting bad information, but I'm like, don't give a crap. Don't give a crap about that. Don't give a crap about that. And by the time you get to the second or the third one, they're tuned out. Even when you get to something they may care about, they're like, oh my gosh, this guy's just talking forever. Just shut it, dude. When's my next appointment? So this is a good reminder. I mean, if you want to go back to classical thinkers, this is known as the Socratic method. Socrates, he used this. He was a masterful teacher because he asked questions, intelligent questions, that then led you to your own conclusions. And, so age-old thing, make sure you learn how to utilize that. And the only way you will get good at it is by practicing, right? So find somebody, practice it. Like Dan, you and I have talked about things company-wise, things that we're going to talk about with the agents or this, that, and the other. How many times have I come in and be like, here's what I think I'm doing, here's how I think I'm going to approach it. What are your thoughts? We do that a fair amount.
The first two, yes, a ton. The last, you hardly ever ask for my input, though.
Oh, you lie.
No, just kidding. You do that a lot, dude. You really do. And like, what's interesting is when you do that, you come thoughts prepared. You don't like, this isn't the first time you thought about it. And so you kind of think it through your head, and then you go like, hey, I need to run this by someone. I need to bounce this off someone. And so that's, yeah, you certainly do that all the time.
Well, and honestly, it's by design, right? Because even if we think we're bright, and we're really not, if we think we're bright, it's always great to ask questions because it quickly exposes your blind spots. So in the client context, if you think the conversation's going over here, and yet you ask a question, all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a minute, we should be going over here. I don't even need to go over here anymore. Man, that's powerful. Right. And then guess what the end result is? Oh, he's such a good listener and he answers the questions that are important to me rather than just blathering on. All right.
Just really quick again, when educational studies will show that if you're not sitting in an educational environment and intending to absorb mass amounts of information, you're going to walk away from that conversation you're just describing, and somebody's going to remember one or two things. So if you spew your entire script of everything you've learned, they're going to walk away remembering one or two things. And if you don't know which things they're going to remember and you don't know what their question was, you just lost a client.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point, James. Awesome. Okay. So having said all of that, in fact, I need to set up my timer here so I make sure we don't run long timer. Okay. 5 minutes. All right. We are good to go. With that said, the question I had for you guys that did give me the thumbs up, what areas, just rapid fire, what did you focus on? Where did you invest your time in your industry knowledge pursuit for May? Was it rapid stats?
Yeah, so I focus on a couple of things. For rapid stats, I focus on, obviously I help manage a team. And so our team is specific to some specific zip codes. And so I focused a lot of my efforts through rapid stats on the numbers of those zip codes, specifically single family residencies, townhomes, condos that are currently available, and the population surrounding those areas, as well as age group and demographics. Then on top of that, I focused on how can I frame or create a framework to be able to explain this within 30 seconds to 2 minutes to a client so that they understand what they're up against when only in those zip codes, only in those zip codes, something like 13% of the populace can actually purchase a property. So informing them of that data can really move the Richter forward in our conversations in getting them to commit more thoroughly.
Wow. So Parker, you actually sound smart. And it's a good thing you have a good system to back you up.
Dum.
Yeah. So what I wanted to ask that question, anybody else, Kyle, where do you go for your information?
I just go to the market data on Flex, and I have a spreadsheet I have it month over month, and I have it per week. So I just finished it before this call. I go a week on a weekly basis, and I share my spreadsheet out to anybody who wants to look at it. And then I also just break it down internally to the different prices, and then what the absorption rate for those prices are. And especially when I have a listing right now that's at 840, and 28 houses have sold in the last month with 160 houses for sale. So it makes the absorption rate, around that 6 month mark, which means we got a price up there. So it gives me more tools when I go into a listing presentation on where we're pricing, what we're doing. If we're under the 500 mark, we're 2 months of inventory. So it's just, I study it, and like I said, on a weekly basis on my spreadsheet, I create a little market data report. I just go to AI and I throw it in AI. It brings me up a little report based on the numbers, and done.
Yeah, awesome. So here's one, since Parker brought up market stats, I'm gonna
Hey,
do
sorry,
this one.
Matt. Hey, Kyle, when you do that in AI, is it also providing you graphs as well?
It's not. I basically just do it on a weekly basis. After I run my weekly reports, I just take it, highlight it, and it's. I haven't got to a spreadsheet yet, or not spreadsheet, but I may put it into like a PDF form. But no, I don't have any graphs yet. I haven't got to that point yet.
Awesome. A lot of ways we can go with this, but as I'm listening to you two, and I'm sure if we got Don and others and James, and here's what I'm hearing just as the broker. I'm like, man, if these guys get in front of clients, look out, right? Because they've got their information researched out, and good job, guys. All right, so just a quick one. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. We talked about rapid stats. If you go to market summary, the second one in is the residential market stat infograph. Why do I share that? Super easy, literally takes like 3 clicks. I constrained it by Utah County, and I did Springville and Mapleton. You can see the zip codes, right? And here's the information. Basically the 5 things that super easy to talk with people about, right? Active listings up 22.6%. Great for when you're dealing with sellers. Sold listings up 40.6%. That's great for buyers, right? Hey, you know what? Yeah, inventory's up, but it's depleting at a faster rate. And then you can talk about the price per square foot. It's up 27.9. That's because some pricing is going on. And again, it depends on what particular market you're talking about, what type of product, whether it's townhome, condo, single family, high end, whatever the case may be. You see my point? Just by knowing these 5 things, you can have a lot of conversation with people at the ready. It doesn't take a lot of research. And here's the kicker. I'm going to switch this screen. I chose to print this, and it's just a 2-page printout. If you want to include the cover page, has your wonderful photo, my Unabomber photo. I can change, the title on this, but basically, I have a at the ready monthly marketing update to send to my clients, and it takes me literally. I could do this in under a minute, right? Now, here's a hypothetical for you guys. If you were to do this on a monthly basis and sent this to your most recent, most loyal, whatever, the people you have, the top 50 or the top 100 people that you interact with or should be interacting, and you had some mild engaging thing like, I don't know, include a video with an email and say, hey, you know what? A lot of disinformation out there in the market. I wanted to share with you some important stats so that if you, your friends, your family, have concerns, reach out to me. I'm always a resource. You know my style. I'm not going to be pushy. If it's time for them to make a move, fine. If not, I'm just happy to educate the population, because I hate seeing people make, bad decisions on probably the most important asset in their life. I don't know. That seems like super easy to do. What do you think the result would be if I did that for 3 months consistently to my top 100 people? Think that would generate any leads? I don't know. And especially if you did it with a follow-up. Hey, did you get my mail? I wanted to follow up, right? And if you wove in there, for those, recently I sold you, so you're probably not moving, but your friends and family members. I'm part of a company that actually owns our own lending. We've become ironically, we become the #1 lending brokerage in the state of Utah because we just have tons of ways for people to get deals done. To go into all the details, I have to explain to them. I just threw that out there. Again, there's so many hooks that we could use, but the key is to get the information out there and to get it out consistently and to start having conversations. So, like you said, Parker. All right, the other one, real quickly. No, that's a relative term when I'm at the wheel here. Let's see here. Okay. This is your login page for the MLS. I've told you guys about this one. This widget, when you first log in, your market update, you know which one I pay attention to very regularly is the price changes. Now, this is for today, so there's not a lot in here, but if I simply come back here and say, hey, on Friday, which a lot of offices take care of a lot of paperwork on Fridays, let's see how many prices went down. 164 prices went down and 26 went up. I don't know. I think that's kind of an interesting stat. You know what? If I wanted to see a trend, what about Thursday? Oh, look at that. 185 went down, 24 went up. I don't know. Let's try another one. Let's go back to Wednesday. See how easy this is, you guys, to be like on top of your market? 248 versus 24. 248 went down on pricing versus going up. I don't know. Seems to me that might be interesting to buyers, and it certainly could be leveraged with sellers and their pricing. Okay. So those are two just quick reminders of things to do at the beginning of the month. Both of those, you don't even have to switch pages. This one comes up when you log in. The rapid stats takes all of 2 links to get to that infographic. So what I'm trying to tell you politely, without being rude, is you have no excuse to not do this. Okay. All right. Last week's broker minute or two, I covered builders contracts, and we're not going to go a deep dive on that. But what I wrote down here was you have to think when you get your PR, right? Whether you're representing a buyer or a seller, what do you do? Maybe I shouldn't ask this question. What do you do with your PR? Yes, you put it in sky.
I read it. I read it.
Do you really read it? Like the
this is
whole
what
thing?
No, this is what I read. I go down to where I see if there's any liens or any type of easements that I need to be aware of, and I review those things. Or if there's anything out of the ordinary that I typically wouldn't see. I wouldn't say that I read the whole thing.
Yeah.
I focus on those areas.
So I wanted to show this on screen really quickly, right? This is a PR on a property that we just put under contract. But right at the front end, and this is from Metro, right? It basically says right in the title, it's a commitment for title insurance. They're committed to provide you an insurance policy on this property, right? But then the second and third squares are important. You need to read this carefully. And then anything that we're going to insure must be based solely in contract. So if there's like a hint and in the, well, I thought you were going to cover this, they're positively declaring whatever this says is going to govern, right? So that should be like a fair warning to you. Now, listen, there is a ton of boilerplate. You kind of have Schedule A, which talks about what type of policy they're issuing, who the principals are, what the purchase price is, who they are, right? And that's all cool. And then they even give you like here the legal description. And we should be familiar with this, right? If you've never read through a PR, take it as a challenge today to go read through and make sure you understand what is there, where it's located, and why it's either boilerplate or whether it's more significant. And here's where I'm going to get to the more significant. Schedule B, Part 1, is kind of boilerplate. Here's all the things the requirements that must be met for the insurance policy to be issued. I'm not going to go through all of these. You can see them on screen, right? But maybe the most important part is Schedule B, Part 2. Notice I have that in a different color, right? These are the exceptions. In other words, Kyle, I'm going to issue you an insurance policy, but here are the things I am not going to cover. I am positively declaring to you up front what this insurance policy will not cover. So let's rattle through these in rapid fashion. Tax assessments, right? We get from the county what the tax assessments are, and I don't know what happens every year. They change. So we're not going to guarantee that. Facts, rights, or interests or claims that are not shown by public records. You're going to see this phrase over and over again, like in item number 3. Easements, liens, and encumbrances, claims thereof that are not shown by public records. Again, we're not covering those. Item 5, water rights and claims to water, whether or not the matter is accepted under A, B, and C are shown by the public record. So if it's not a public record, which a lot of water rights aren't, they're not covering it. Okay, any lien. So if it's new construction, again, there's a process. If you're not aware of this, right, there's the lien registry. If it's not on that public record and there's some other lien recorded, we're not covering that on this insurance policy. So we can go on, but it's important to know what the exceptions are. Okay. So on this particular property, there's a shared driveway, there's a right-of-way easement, and here's how much money was owed on the property, at least when they initially bought it back in 2014. Okay, and then you can see it looks like he has a HELOC out on this as well. All right, and then they go into, if you really don't understand some of the terms, you can go to the tail end and see what each of the terms they use in a contract actually means. So why do I bring this up? One, you really should know your PRs very well, but the reason I brought it up in context with the builder's contract is, and stop sharing here for a second. How many of you, Parker, you have to be honest with us, how many of you actually go and read your builder contracts, whether it's Fieldstone, DR Horton, Arrive, Edge, whoever the builders are? Do you really go and read your builder contracts?
I actually do. It usually takes me about a day, and I typically highlight all the areas that we're concerned about and bring it back to the builder. That is one thing I've always done, because I learned from, are we allowed to say the builder's name without being disparaging or whatnot?
No.
I did a deal with Arrive about 10 years ago with a client, and in the contract for Arrive, it specifically states, if you have any problems with Arrive, if Arrive does a crappy job, I'm paraphrasing, so I guess it's not specific. If yeah,
I know where you're going with this one.
Okay,
you can't disparage them publicly.
Okay, all right, good. If they are, if they've done anything wrong, if they've done a crappy job with their building, with their products, with their crews, whatever the case is, the buyer is prohibited from posting on social media anything disparaging about Arrive Homes. And I was like, there's no way my clients are signing that. And turns out that we had that removed from the contract, and Arrive agreed to do it. And 5 months later, my buyers were suing Arrive for something terrible that they had done to the property. And they would have lost that opportunity if that section had not been removed.
Yeah, none of us want to advocate for suing and doing litigation, but you know what? In our line of business, sometimes it ends up there. And I'm glad to hear that, Parker, because your fiduciary of reasonable care, what does that actually mean? What would a reasonable person, meaning the buyer or the seller, expect of somebody who's being paid $10, $15, $20, $30,000? See how that I'm bringing this up by design, because when it gets to litigation, right, they're going to be like, so Parker, you were paid $30,000. Did you ever read through the contract you told your clients go ahead and sign?
Right? Not only did I read through it,
and you're going to say, but they signed a buyer due diligence, right? Which means I'm not an attorney. I'm not a blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And as the attorney, I'm like, that's not what I'm talking about, man. This is the tool that is going to be used on this transaction for real estate, of which you are licensed to help them through. And they had an expectation that you would be looking out for their interest. How could you look out for the interest if you never looked through the contract? See, this is the way it goes, right?
Yeah. And you can ask any builder. You can ask any builder, guys. You can ask any builder. I prefer to do it when my clients are with me. Do you use your contract or do you use the state approved contract? And they go, it technically be state approved, but you understand. And they go, oh, well, we use our own contracts. And I go, great. If we decide to pursue this property, I'm going to need to see a copy of that contract before you send it to my clients.
Yeah,
And
sure.
then now you have a paper trail. You can mark it up, you can highlight it, you can send it to your clients, and you have a paper trail that you've done your fiduciary responsibility.
Well, yeah, great point. And here's the thing. The reason I brought that up, this is what I shared on my broker minute or two. My son and his wife, one of my sons and his wife wanted to do an investment property with us. We went to a DR Horton after looking at other subdivisions and decided, yeah, that'd be a good fit for what we're trying to accomplish. And $8,000 of earnest money up front. And I remember the agents when we walked in say, yeah, you know what, when you give that, there's really no grace period. You know, it's pretty much non-refundable when you sign the contract. I'm like, so you submit a contract, it gets executed. There's no, well, it's new construction, blah, 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 right? Well, fast forward, they were offering a $9,000 credit if you bought a property. I'm like, cool, well, that helps, you know. We'll put that to paying down equity or something. Then of course you get the contract, Parker, and it says, oh yeah, this is a lender credit, right? So you have to use our lender. I'm like, yeah, not interested. And to make a very long story short, we went back and forth for about 2 weeks. And in the meantime, the price went down from 389 to 375, 3 different price drops during that time frame, which kind of corresponds with what we saw on the MLS on the market update widget. So, you know, I knew that, and the longer we took, I knew there was a high probability they're going to come back on pricing. So I went to the agent and I said, hey, listen, we need to get this figured out. I want to use my lender. Your guys quoted me full point higher than Lifetime Home Loans. That's ridiculous. You know what that does? Had it in a spreadsheet. It says it negative cash flows on the property. I'm not interested in buying an investment property that negative cash flows. And he said, well, let me go back to him and talk, blah, blah, blah. And the next line was a couple days later, he came back and said, you know what, we just need to get the contract signed. If you sign the contract, it will provide momentum and we can get those other details worked out. I'm like, yeah, you know, when I got $8,000 that becomes non-refundable. And he said the following verbatim, I was there, I'm the guy, there's no filter here. He said, oh yeah, you know what, we don't advertise it, but actually section 6.26 and 6.27 give you an exit based on financing. So just go ahead and sign the contract. And said, you know what? Let me spend the night. Tomorrow morning, I will read it and I'll reach out back to you. So let me just share my screen real quickly so you can see this. All right. The gray section. The gray section. So now remember, this was in the context of, oh yeah, you can totally exit based on your financing and get your $8,000 earnest money. And I could bore you with all the other stuff. Trust me, I'm a contract guy. I went through it. This is the only provision that has anything remotely related to this. So the box is checked that, you know, there is a loan contingency, right? And it basically says in this section, you're going to no later than 30 days, but no sooner than 15 days prior to closing, show that you're qualified. Written evidence, right, to the seller that you have your lending in order. So these other 2 boxes aren't checked, so they have nothing to do with it. So far, section 2.6, there's no exit there, right, for me and to protect my earnest money. So I go to 6.27, failure to obtain loan approval. Notice the title. It didn't say, like in our standard REPC, if I'm not satisfied with the terms, it says if you can't get approved, right? Failure to obtain loan approval. That is the exit we're talking about. And you'll see in this paragraph, it's not even very clear that my earnest money is remotely protected. If buyer fails to notify the seller on or before the loan contingency date that the buyer is terminating the agreement because, and it has to have this reason, because the buyer cannot obtain financing, and you didn't notify them, well, obviously your earnest money is going to be vulnerable. But then it goes on to the second condition, this if buyer fails to provide a loan approval document required by section 626 above and does not provide notice of the termination for failure to obtain financing prior to the loan contingency date, then the seller may terminate the purchase agreement and cancel escrow, and the seller shall retain the deposit as liquidated damages. So I went back to the agent. I'm like, hey, you know what? Interesting thing. I went back and read your contract, specifically 626 and 627. There's no provision at all for me to get my earnest money back. And he's like, there isn't? So I use this little anecdotal story for you to remind you, who does the agent for the builder represent? The builder. Is he really held to account for anything he tells you as the other agent? Not very much, right? Not very much. And to your point, Parker, early on, it used to be years ago, Arrive would use the new construction repsy and then addend it. They've even gone away from that. And I have yet to find a builder's contract is tilted in favor of the buyer. Almost every provision, and I mean that literally. I watch you name it. I dare you to provide me a builder's contract in the state of Utah that is tilted in favor of the buyer.
Hey,
There's
Matt,
a
how long
reason.
would-
Hold on a sec. There's a reason. There's a reason they don't use the new construction repsy provided by UAR. That's because it does protect the buyer. There's a reason why they pay for an attorney to write their own contract. It's to protect them and to make, in this case, heavy leverage, right? And knowing that the agents can kind of say crazy A stuff and not really be held to account for it, right? If I went back and said, well, Jeff, you said this, and I'm like, yeah, I don't remember saying that to you. What am I going to do? Right? So, as good agents, make sure for your clients you are reading through. And this is why I brought up the PR. You don't, if you have time like Parker does, apparently, you can spend a day reading through a contract. I don't have that kind of time. But much like a PR, you know the paragraphs to look for, right? The compensation paragraphs, the indemnification paragraphs, you get very adept at scanning through them. But yep, that's an important tag, and I want to come back and read that. Oh, tag that one. And you may end up with 4 or 5 paragraphs that you really need to scrutinize. But at least do that. Please, at least do that. And if you run into any questions, reach out to guys like Dan or Julie or Neil. If they're not available or you stump them, I'm always available to jump in. But let's make sure we're representing our clients well. Did I beat that horse to death well enough, Dan?
I don't know if you beat it well enough to death. I'm just anxious for you to go back in a week and a half and see that the unit's still available and beat them up for another $5,000-$10,000. I'm excited for you.
Trust me, you're reading my mind. I actually went in, just so you know, just a final thing on that. I said, listen, I get it. Why don't we split the difference? I don't need $9,000 in closing costs. I already talked to Lifetime. Their lender, DHI, had quoted me $7,500 in closing costs. I went to RET and we were right at about $4,000 in closing costs. And where I was being quoted 8.125, I was able to get 7.25 for $110. And wow. I talked to him 2 days later. He's like, no, we're even below that. We're going to be in the high 6s. So just hold off. So my rates are going to be improving. Their pricing is going to come down. I went to him and said, listen, I'll still do the deal. Raise the price by $2,000 and give me $4,000 in closing costs. And he came back and said, yeah, we're not going to do that. And Dan, seriously, wow. I felt like saying, well, I'll be looking forward to your call.
See you in 2 weeks.
Contracts and negotiations, right? All right.
I love it.
All right. The last thing I wanted to finish on in our last. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I know you got limited time, but I should mention there's a reason why we have Savannah, and there's a reason why builders give us contracts of 26, 28, 29, 31 pages long. And a lot of that is because when we, even as agents, look at the paperwork that we have to do, we're like, oh my God, I wish there was a way that I could not do this. And could you imagine from the consumer standpoint, when a builder lays down a contract this big for you, you won't read it. You'll just sign whatever because you're excited, one, about getting a home, but two, you're like, I'm not going through all this paperwork. I don't have all this time. And so there's a reason why they do the things that they do.
Yeah, well, thanks, Parker. unfortunately, Savannah and Kayla, they do get those documents, and then they set up calls with me and be like, "Hey, what does this paragraph mean?" I'm like, "Damn it, Parker, read your own document." No, it's a good point. Listen, here's what I wanted to finish on. And a lot of you, I'm not seeing your picture, so I hope you're still paying attention. By thumbs up on your, down at the bottom under your reactions, by thumbs up, how many of you attended the Jared James MEC call last week? Allison Booth, good. Daryl, Janelle. Okay, I appreciate the honesty. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Shame on you. Shame. Oh, Parker, no excuses, just shame.
No, I was asking if
Here's
it was recorded.
It
Has it
is.
been
And I'm
recorded?
gonna,
Okay, cool.
because you're on this call today, I'm gonna share in the chat here just a minute where you can find these. Similar question. How many of you a few weeks before that attended the Travis Robertson MEC call? Okay. Okay. Thank you, Kyle. Or is that a question? Okay. Listen, you guys, I attended both of them, and I was asked the question afterwards, what did you think of that call? And I'm like, listen, these guys are very steep in what's going on currently in the industry, the big moving parts. But more important than that, they're very much tacticians. Okay, so there's a big wave washing over all of us. The question of the day is, what do you do about it? So I'm going to just, when we're done here, before I finish the call, I'm going to share with you the link. Promise me, it's 2 hours, guys, between the two of them, 2 hours. And I promise you, the content is totally. Kyle, was it worth your time? It's great information, right? And it's not just your. Go ahead, Kyle.
I said it was great information, 100%.
Yeah. It's not just your run of the mill, hey, you got to pick up the phone and call. You got to, no, this is 10 layers deep. I mean, Travis Robertson, I listed here, he goes through 7 phases to the buyer presentation. And I'm just going to rattle them off real quickly. And you're going to hear them. You're like, oh, yeah, I know that. I promise you. No, you don't. You don't. There's sequencing, there's particular words to be used. And again, it's not a word by word dialogue, it's a framework to follow. And it is important, the sequencing, so that you have success at the end of the day. So 7 phase, introduction and rapport. 2nd phase, discovery. And by the way, asking a lot of questions, which is to get them to open up rather than just presenting or performing. We already covered that today. The 3rd one is your 3 roles. And this is where you establish your value. If you've been paying attention for the last 6 months, it's like realtors suck at stating what their values are and making sense of that to the client. So that's the 3rd one. 4th one, your process, setting up and delivering on expectations. The next one, your commission, get ahead of common concerns. And that was a big one. He spent a lot of time on that one. Getting your buyer's agency, spent a lot of time on that. And the final one is addressing any objections. And for sake of time, I'm not going to go through Jared James, but there was a lot of similarly great content about the opportunity, literally the opportunity that lies ahead of us right now. So in summary, before I forget, let me pull this up because I told you I would. Let's see. All right. So I don't know how many of you have a link to Gold Nation, but this is our connection with Gold Nation being a partner of theirs. But here's the link that you want. Okay. Vimeo.com/Remax Gold Nation. And you can see down here, it has MEC replays. Dan, what does the MEC stand for? Putting Dan on the spot.
Matt, can you post that to the chat, that link?
I can, yes.
Thanks.
I'm on my phone, and of course, I go to the internet to dial in the URL you just gave us. But
Motivate. Go ahead.
stand for motivate, educate, and collaborate.
Yeah,
Well, I
and
like that.
it literally lives up to that. So I just posted the link in chat, so make sure you copy it down.
Oh, perfect.
But while you're doing that, I want to show you. So this is the link I just sent you. This is one of the great values that we have as being part of Gold Nation. One of them, right? We already have our KV Core training, but Brian Groff does a great job with additional KV Core training. That's at the front end, and then just below that, all of the MEC links, right? So there's your Jared James, there's your Travis Robertson, there's the team panel that our Chase Ames was on, the 2024 outlook. And again, this isn't antiquated stuff. It's actually very useful information and falls into that category of what are you doing each month to become more knowledgeable and prepared and ready. I mean, I could take this KV Core and combine it with Travis Robertson's, you know, one of his processes. What is your process? Oh, well, I actually utilize KV Core. I use SkySlope. Here's what we do to transact this. Or as you mentioned, Parker, I use Savannah or Kayla. They are transaction coordinators extraordinary. You can expect a video from them here, outline, and then a phone call, and they're going to outline process and what the next steps are and the dates that are coming up. And are you kidding? This is what most of the public engages with us for, because they're fearful of the process. They don't know what it's about. We deal with it day in and day out. They don't. And the better you get at presenting, man, you are in, I mean, it's like an Allstate commercial. You are in good hands, right? And it's not just saying it, you can now articulate it. I have systems to make sure I think I've shared this with you, Parker. The ability to say, I've been in the industry 23 years and I've never lost a client's earnest money unless they choose to. And I can say that honestly because I've got good process around that. So anyway, any final thoughts, questions, concerns, anything you want me to be looking at for our next meeting? Wow. Okay, then. Deborah, nothing?
Yeah,
I mean, I just
Matt.
watch you migrate from outside to inside to enjoying the sunny weather.
I have kids. I try to get away from the noise.
Well, you did a good job.
Hey, Matt.
Anyway, listen. Yeah, Parker, go ahead.
I'd love to hear you talk about that transitionary period from spring into summer, and what that means for the adapting marketplace, and how we can be better prepared for that, and also how we can, through preparation, really guarantee ourselves a certain level of business.
Yeah, well, I can guarantee you a certain level of business if you guarantee me you'll come in and work. I don't mean that. I don't mean that about you, Parker. I mean that the agent population. There's a funny tight correlation between those two things. So, so good. I've written that down. And here's one last thing I will tell you. It's kind of in a stat category. There's a lot of still questions. Well, what's the Fed going to do? What's the Fed going to do? If you don't pay attention to the bulletin and what Rhett and others at Gold Nation put out there, you really should. It's served up to you. It's delivered to you so that you understand some of the latest and greatest in our lending space, which is one of our value adds. But here's what I would tell you. Tracking a lot of indicators, including the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and there's whole probability matrix on this where they pull in all kinds of data from the economy. Right now, I think the last time I checked, which was Friday, there's a 41% chance. What it does, it takes the meeting of the Fed, which is almost monthly, not really, almost, and says by month, what's the probability that we're going to get a quarter point drop or a half point drop or stay steady? The first significant opportunity or probability for change comes in September. September 18th is the meeting. And there's a 41% chance that we get a 0.25% drop. So take that how you will, chew on that. It should empower you for you when you run across people who say, "Oh, I'm just waiting for rates to change." Say, well, you'll be waiting a while. And it's not even a major probability. It's not over 50%. It's a less than 50-50 probability that it changes 0.25 point in September. So the market is, at least, the lending space within reason, it is what it is for the foreseeable future. So
well, what a crappy way to end the call, Matt.
well, no, Dan, I hadn't. Oh my hell, I hadn't finished. So if you went to your sales meeting and you saw Lifetime's PDF that Jeremy and others presented, it's a very compelling case of why buy now, even if rates aren't moving, and refi a year later, you're going to be substantially further ahead. And that's to say nothing about sellers who are a little more motivated right now, including builders. So there, how's that for a positive, Dan?
Yeah, I almost got there a little bit. But
Well,
you know
listen,
what, dude? That's
yeah.
That's the reality, and it's very important to know it and to be able to articulate that, like you say over and over again, right? Like we can pretend it's not true, we can pretend that that's not the reality we're living in, but it is. And so, the important part is the way you communicate that with your clients. But you know what? The buying window, it's not today, it's not tomorrow, but over the next couple of months, let's keep an eye out for something that's going to work for you, because it right now is a great time to buy. Because as soon as rates do start heading down, we firmly believe that there's going to be a rush back to the marketplace. And so if we can put ourselves in a position to get pre-qualified at today's rates, to get looking at a home that's going to work for you at today's pricing, we really do believe that the pricing tomorrow is going to be significantly higher and interest rates will be lower. So buying today's prices and coupling that with tomorrow's interest rate sure sounds like a winner to me.
If you don't have the PDF from Lifetime on that scenario that literally shows it, right? The significant equity that you will have, the lower payments you will have, you need to get that. Reach out to myself, Aaron Menard, your broker, whatever. Before I finish, last 10 seconds, I've neglected to acknowledge Mackenzie Hefner, who has joined us as our office manager down in our St. George Bluff Street office. So happy to have her on board. We got all the spark plugs in now. The engine's like humming along. So I appreciate her and Kayla for joining in the organization, and look forward to a very productive summer. So get out there today and go kill it, guys. Thanks for being on the call.